welcome to the Questionable Album Club. On the panel today, we've got Marcus Kingwell. Hello, Marcus.
Hi.
We've got Steve Gibson. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
We've got Andrew Steen. Hello, Steenie.
Evening.
And we've got Ross English. Hello, Ross.
Hello.
And Ross, you've done that thing where you blurred your background out. You've blurred all your guitars out.
Oh yeah, that wasn't. I was sort of playing around. I was between the guitars and the messy shelf. I didn't know which way to go.
Oh, okay.
I've had me
There you
big
go.
screen here.
That's better. That's better.
Yeah.
Right, that's our panel today. Thanks everyone for joining us. Today's choice was by Steve. It was a classic of the questionable genre, Van Halen III from 1998, which I'd never heard. I mean, 1998 was probably the most inappropriate year for a Van Halen album to come out of all. It was kind of pre-new metal. I mean, it was when metal was kind of at an absolute low, wasn't it? And I think I was aware that Gary Cherone had joined Van Halen, but never listened to it because we were presumably all doing other things at that time and listening to the music. So this was a genuine, completely new thing to me. So yeah, it was. And the other thing, we'll talk about this, but I'll just give the introduction that a lot of people consider this an Eddie Van Halen solo album because he plays drums on it. There's no Alex Van Halen doesn't play any drums anywhere at all. Michael Anthony plays bass on 3 songs. Eddie Van Halen plays the rest of the bass. Eddie plays all the guitar, wrote all the songs, and of course Gary Cherone from the Stream on vocals. Recorded at Eddie Van Halen's studio, 5150 Studios. Ostensibly produced by Mike Post. About how much he had to do with it. So, and it's a very grown-up sounding record, isn't it? It doesn't sound like, there's no party songs. The songs about pussies and all that sort of stuff. It's just I say grown up, but it's grown up sounding. It's a kind of constant adult rock album. So very interesting, more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Steve, do you want to just tell us why you chose it and your history? Have you heard this before?
I wasn't even aware till I don't know a month or so ago that this album actually existed, or that the Extreme guy had even done a thing with Van Halen. I was completely unaware of it.
You didn't know that. You never knew that.
I never knew that. So my history of Van Halen, like everyone should, obviously love all the Lee Roth era Halen. It's unquestionable. One of my most cherished memories is seeing that lineup at Donington '84, which I believe Marcus was there as well. And I genuinely cried when the full footage came out. Was it last year or whatever, for a bit on YouTube? It genuinely made me cry. It took me back to I didn't even recognize the me that was there. It's just brilliant. And so I love Van Halen, love the Roth era Van Halen. What I've heard, I never owned any, but I've got friends that had a lot of the Sammy Hagar stuff, and what I hear of that, I quite like Sammy Hagar, and I quite like that. And so it just seemed obvious that when became aware of this album, I just saw Van Halen 3, and I thought, and it seems to come up a lot in worst album ever things. And so I thought, well, ideal for this forum. We'll leave it there. that's why it's chosen. And
yeah, it does come up in those sort of notorious kind of like worst album by a major artist sort of thing. Marcus, what was your please no more Donington '84. We don't need to hear that, mate.
Yeah, did you know I was there, Seb? '84.
No,
it's probably news to you. Yeah, well,
it's like fucking Rock on Tours going on with the Sex Pistols. It's our version of them whittling on about
on the Green or whatever it's called. Yeah, oh Lord. No, I loved Van Halen before 1984, probably early '80s onwards. Sort of started to discover their back catalogue. But actually, my relationship with them is a bit weird in that I thought the debut album was stunning, obviously nailed on classic. 1984 was the nailed on classic. I then got hold of Fair Warning, which was pretty poor, to be honest. I played it over and over, hoping to get into it, but I thought it was pretty cool. That's from something like '79 or '80. And I've cherry picked bits of Van Halen over the years, and I think they work best for me as a sort of greatest hits type band. Anyway, that aside, this album, I stuck it on a few days ago, put it on in the car, and my first listen, or certainly for the first half of of it, I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is really exciting. It's bringing back loads of memories, and that was really, really good. when I got to the later parts of the record, I was getting bored with it because the tracks were long and the overall album was long. And regular listeners to this podcast will know I don't really like long albums. I prefer them to be tight in the way they're curated. So that was losing my attention. I gave it a second listen all the way through today, and I was it was like the initial rush of excitement that I got the first time, unfortunately, wasn't repeated. It's a sort of, you know how some records are growers and you get into them after, but this was sort of the reverse. So I had a very good initial impression, and then the second time it was quite a lot diminished. That said, I think there's some good stuff in here. I think if I'd heard it in 1998, I would have been as critical as all the other people were at the time of, this is sounding out of touch and all the rest of it. But now I'm listening to it as a rock fan, hearing something new from Van Halen, almost as a look back in time. So I'm comparing it with my sort of overall musical taste rather than how does it slot into 1998. And I think that 1998 view would have given, well, I know it did give people a very different response, because it was a fish out of water in those times. So that's really my overview. I think that's probably enough for now.
Yeah, very good, Marcus. Yeah, very interesting. We'll go to Ross next, because someone who's not a natural Van Halen fan. I hope you don't mind us necessarily suggesting you're not a natural Van Halen fan.
I'm not offended.
The rest of us are. So what were your thoughts on this?
I'd never listened to a Van Halen album before, I thought I assumed that this was going to be one of these bands where you know more songs than you realise. And I've done my homework this week. I've listened to 5 other Van Halen albums to give myself some context. And no, that's not the case. I know 2 of their songs. I know Jump, and I know Why Can't This Be Love, and I didn't recognise anything else. I mean, I might have heard other stuff, but it clearly hasn't stuck. So I thought the first album was great. I thought that was genuinely good. And then after that, I thought it tended to go towards a little bit of formula in terms of one-line choruses designed for punching the air at arena gigs. But it never got boring, because God knows why I haven't listened to this before, because I love Eddie Van Halen. And I used to subscribe to Guitarist magazine in the late 80s, but I just sort of lumped him with the sort of other widdly merchants who were ubiquitous at that time. But he's great. I mean, not because of his dexterity, which is clearly good, but he just always managed to find some sort of hook in the song. I mean, sometimes the guitar solos can go towards the showy, but if you've got that talent, then why not show it? But it's just actually what's going on underneath. There's always something interesting. So I didn't come away initially as a Van Halen fan, but I was really engaged by this. So then on this album, I think it's flawed. I think that there are some songs which are awful. I think it starts off well. It then sags towards in the middle, which the one that sounds like late Genesis, called Once, and the song either side of that. I think that's a real sag. And then it picks up again, and then it hits its absolute nadir with the Ballot or the Bullet, which is not just the worst album on the album, it's one of the worst songs I think I've ever heard. I don't think there's a redeeming feature in that song. So it's got its low points. You're absolutely right, Marcus, that half the songs are too long. There's nothing wrong with a 7-minute song, but it has to do more than repeat the first minute and have a guitar solo. There's a lot of songs there that need at least 2 or 3 minutes chopped out of it. And lyrically, it could be appalling. I mean, I thought when I first listened to it, I thought lyrically this is appalling. But I took some time today to read all the lyrics, and actually it's not. That's unfair. It's just it can hit real depths at times, but and it tends to be the stuff that shouted the loudest. So I thought lyrically it was awful. But having said that, I liked it. I really did like it. I thought that between the down points, it was. I mean, the fact it was stylistically all over the place, I found was really interesting, because when the second song came on, Without You, which is a nice song, I thought, oh no, is this now setting a template for what we're doing? And it doesn't. And it's always surprising. I think the vocals I mean, it would be unfair to say he has one setting, but compared to David Lee Roth, where you could almost hear the raised eyebrows and winks to the crowd, it's very much, I'm going balls out here. But he's got presence, and if you compared it to the other album we listened to, where an old band were on their third singer trying to extend the life of the beast, the Genesis album, you compare those two vocal performances, and no contrast. This vocal it carries stuff. It's there. It's very just yelling at you half the time, but it's got stuff. And and then it's got Eddie Van Halen. Which and everywhere, and it's not that he's reinventing guitar on this album. It's just that there are nice little phrases here. He's always doing something. I think it sounds like that he was bought a new guitar process for Christmas and he wants to try off every setting at times. But that's okay. And I absolutely loved How Many Say I thought it had this beautiful simplicity to it that at the first time I heard it, I thought that's silly, but I actually adored it. And the fact that after all this shouting that's gone on, you suddenly get a vocal that sounds like he smoked 20 Rothmans before he attempted it. I thought it was really charming. And I came away every listen to this, having listened to How Many Say I, smiling.
Ross, that's Eddie Van Halen. He's the lead singer.
Yes. On that. Yes, I do. Yeah, and I know I've read stuff as where he's got a lot of slack for it. But I thought that was really lovely. So it is very flawed, I think, in places, but I was charmed.
Ross, that was one. What research, mate? You listened to 5 Van Halen albums, steadily getting worse and worse and worse. Although I take issue with Women and Children First, and then you read all the lyrics. This is amazing. This is amazing. Wow, wonderful. You get top marks for research. Steenie, when you go, mate?
Mute. The kids have gone to bed now, so hopefully you don't hear any more shrieks. Well, my history of Van Halen is quite in depth. I came in backwards because obviously being a tad younger, I didn't go to Donington 1984. Which I did have on my bingo card for this. I didn't think it would get mentioned in the first 20 seconds. So I was a bit young to go to Donington 84, but that made an impression on me. I was only 8 at the time. And when Jump came out, I saw the video and I was just staggered and thought it was amazing. I just loved everything about it, the colour, the movements, guys jumping around. There's a guy doing a sort of crazy solo, everything about it I loved. And then what was odd was that I kept hearing people saying they were like a heavy band or they're a heavy rock band. And I was like, well, they're that keyboard band with the really good guitar solo in it. And I didn't twig because that was where they were by the time I started hearing them. And then I went back and, I actually, the first Van Halen album I bought though was OU 812, which is the Hagar era. And it's a bit of a nadir, that record, I think. It's very unrocking and it's just a drag generally. I think even if I was to revisit it now under the auspices of this podcast, I would find it a major drag, that record, I think. And then I eventually went back to Van Halen 1 and was just blown away. And then, the rest about it. I think they're a fantastic band with David Lee Roth. That whole run of records. I mean, there's some down points. I think Fair Warning isn't as bad as Diver Down. It's so my relationship with Van Halen is pretty strong up to the Hagar era. And I do like Hagar, but mostly with Montrose, really. That's the Hagar I like. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got Gary Cherone coming into this record, who I also have some history with, in that in the space of I think it was about a year, I saw Extreme 3 times in concert. And to prove it, I'm even wearing, just especially, my 3 Sides to Every Story long-sleeved tour shirt from 1992 when I took my sister to see them at Whitley Bay Ice Rink, which was supported by Neil Sean's Hardline. So we go back a long way on both strands here. But interestingly, obviously, Extreme were never that cool, ever. And so they were one of those bands that I always sort of hid my affection for, because of my harder rocking mates would be just like, what is this girly music that you like? you know, and it was mostly for the solos because Nuno was amazing, and yeah, and the sort of like Poundland Queen pretensions that they eventually got into on that third album. So yeah, there is some shame there, which I've now embraced, obviously wearing this t-shirt. So we go back a long way. All of the main players in this record have some history. Even producer Mike Post, I've got some history with because he composed my favorite all-time theme tune, the Rockford Files. So there you go. We got.
Steve, that's what a beautiful. We've had Ross's incredible research. We've had your massive preamble. So should we pause you before your thoughts on this, because we've had your context.
That's the context.
Yeah, so we'll wait.
We'll have some album thoughts later.
We'll have your album thoughts later. Like we'll have Steve's album thoughts later. I'll just give my quick. I mean, what you say about the early Van Halen albums, I think they do get. They didn't write any songs. There were more and more covers. The album's got like sort of half an hour in length, like 3 or 4 covers, and they were just like chucked out.
It got desperate. I mean, I think was it Diver Down is 50% covers. Is it 50%?
Yeah, it is 50%, but it's got little guitars. They all have slightly redeeming things.
Fair Warning,
I love Fair Warning because it's like their heaviest record, and I think they've all got something you can hold dear. I think they're all great records. One is obviously a masterpiece. Blah 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 blah. And Four, of course, was I think the one where it all came. Did you not recognise Panama, Ross, when you played, or Hot for Teacher? Ross, you muted yourself.
You're muted, Ross.
Ross, we can't hear you. Ross, can you hear us?
Oh, I think he's got one of those dodgy mics like I used to have that mutes you.
We can't hear you, Ross. Okay, he's just doing us a thumbs up. Let's move on then. And I never listened to any. I think after Dave left Van Halen, people either went with Sammy, or they went Dave, and I went Dave, definitely. Even Smile and everything. It was kind of weird, wasn't it? You could go either or. Not many people.
I disagree. I disagree. A lot of people I know went with both. You know.
Yeah, that's people you know. That's like Rick. That's Rick and Keith. But yeah, I very much went down the Dave route myself. So anyway, my thoughts on this. You had never heard of it. I didn't really like Extreme because they were never cool. I loved More Than Words. I still love it even back in the day. I just thought it was beautiful. Lovely piece of music, lovely song. I teach it quite a lot. But Gary Cherone, I think, was a great singer. And so I put this on with trepidation, but like Marcus, I really liked it. I thought the instrumental at the beginning was lovely. I thought Without You was absolutely fantastic. It's got a brilliant video, by the way. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's too long, and all the songs are too long. But I mean, I agree with kind of the essence of what everybody's saying. I think Eddie's playing. It's listenable just to hear his playing. Everything he does is and it's weird because at that time, apparently, by all accounts, he was in the grip of his addictions. He was right on the cusp of full-fledged kind of, a breakdown and everything, and was a complete, control freak, and he did it. So you would never know that he was kind of on the edge of kind of psychological collapse for making this, because it's such a coherent. I guess that's perhaps why the songs are so long. They just kind of sort of self-indulgence of just like, a bit like that. The Be Here Now by Oasis. Sometimes when bands are just so, coked out, they just kind of, the songs just become really, really long and just like boring. But I think there's an essence of greatness in all of them, genuinely, because I think the riffs are brilliant. I love the Eddie. He always puts a fifth in the bottom of his chords, which I love so much. Which is like Warren Martini. A lot of bands in the '80s kind of ripped off, but it's just so effective. It's so clever, and he's always doing interesting things, even in songs that are relatively boring. And you're right about Gary Cherone. It's either on or off. But I think actually there's what's that song I really like? There's the Genesis one, I agree, but I think there's enough going on to make it interesting all the way through. Dirty Water Dog, is weird. Josephina, that's a strange song, isn't it? But it's interesting. It's kind of it's almost as if Eddie Van Halen heard OK Computer or stuff like that and thought, oh, okay, layers. And it is a grown-up Van Halen album, which is why a lot of people on the internet, fuck you, motherfucker, American Van Halen fans hate it so much because it doesn't sound. It's not a party album at all, is it? It's a kind of slightly introspective musical album with lots of layers and lots of things happening, which I think is admirable. I think it works so surprisingly well. So I think, so I was pleasantly surprised. I've listened about 2 or 3 times, and every song gets boring, apart from the instrumental. So I was very pleasantly surprised. Steve, Gibson, we'll come to you. Do you want to tell us what you
Yeah, I
thought?
If you can hear
thought
me.
the instrument at the start I liked, and then the first track, which the single with the video, I was really intrigued by. I thought this is going to be great. And then on first listening, I quite enjoyed the full album. I was mainly transfixed by Eddie Van Halen's playing, as you know, because it's really fantastic throughout. Um, it does for me miss Alex Van Halen. He's the most underrated drummer in rock by country mile. You listen to anything on 1984, even the way he plays for the song, and the way he follows his brother with lines and stuff and rhythms is sublime, and it's really missed. And but I've listened to this album 3 times, and it's been, as is often the case sometimes with the diminishing album, it's diminishing returns. Quite often the case with albums we have to listen to here, and it just sort of the more I listen to it, I can't stand. I don't remember him sing like that in Extreme. I couldn't. His voice was just getting right on my tits by the end of the second listen. It was just too screechy and it sounded affected, and it was just getting right on my nerves. Um, I was kind of, I drifted out because I was getting bored. I was getting bored second time through, and because for me it severely lacks songs, even with even with the Hagar era. From what the bits and bobs I've heard, and the singles like Pound Cake and Why Can't This Be Love, they're all like great songs, and they've all got great hooks, and maybe he can't do it on his own, and it's a little bit too introspective. I don't know, but and then the end, the one at the end, which sounds like an outtake off The Wall, I really didn't like that. I really don't like The Wall, so it sounded that to me that was, yeah, I could have done without that. But I agree with everyone else. It's all so far. It's all the songs just there aren't any. I don't like a few party songs on there because if I want to put Van Halen on, that's what I'm in the mood for. Um, and I probably won't bother with this one again. I'm glad I've heard it, and I really enjoyed some of the playing on it. I missed Alex, and
Steve, what did you think of Eddie as a drummer?
not a tremendous amount really. I felt he was much the same as I think about his piano playing.
He had the same sort of similar snare tone to Alex.
Yeah. I think that's the other big point for me. I found the production really strange on this. The production quite like it was demos almost, some of it, you know.
Yeah, a lot of people online have complained about the production. Do,
Yeah.
do you think? Do you think he aped that kind of slightly trebly snare tone to make people think it was Alex on the record?
I've absolutely no idea on that. Maybe that's just the tone he's grown up with.
Yeah,
On
quite
lights, you
possibly.
know.
Yeah.
Do we
Well,
know
it's
why
probably
he
Alex's drum kit.
do we know why he played the drums on it? Was there a
I don't
falling
know.
out
Yeah,
moment?
did anyone do any?
I think Alex was suffering from addiction issues of his own.
Ah.
I don't think they were getting on. I think they're all locked up in their ivory towers, not getting on,
That's
drinking and drugging.
just one other thing from me was obviously looked at the historical context, and I sort of was looking at the other sort of rock and metal albums that came out in 1998, and it really was barren times, slim pickings. Well, it was just it was, yeah, it was, and at that point I was completely uninterested in rock and metal, and
I,
I felt justified by reading the list of what was coming out. To be honest with you, because didn't feel
yeah,
like much doing. So, but in a historical context, at the list of albums I saw that were released in the genre of 1998, this was probably the only one I'd actively think, oh, well, I'll give that a listen, you know. So, and now I have. Next.
Marcus, further
Yeah,
thoughts?
I'm fascinated by this. We picked these pretty well actually in the club on these transition points in musical genres. And the 90s, we had it with Dan Reed Network to a different degree. Everyone was wondering, sort of post grunge, all the long haired bands from the 80s were thinking, what the hell do we do next? So they're going, some are going, oh, it's funk metal. Some are going for a harder, maybe even crossing over to thrash. You've got bands like Van Halen, and who are thinking, what's our relevance at the moment? So one thing I was quite excited about was on the first song, Without You, the first substantial song, is he going to do a guitar solo or not? Because around about this time, it might have been a little bit later actually, the new metal scene, guitar solos were dead, weren't they? No one did them, because you felt very much in the old world. But it's Eddie Van Halen, and I'm really glad there was a solo in there. excuse me, there's some other tones in there which have gone away from the sort of classic metal sound, which I think is really good of them. It puts it in a different level, and adult, as you say, a more mature kind of footing. And there's always something interesting going on. But I think probably another reason why the diehard fans didn't like it is particularly without David Lee Roth, the tongue-in-cheek picture postcard humour or the seaside postcard humour's gone, and you're left with cliched rock lyrics is all that's left. So you kind of get 90% of the fun, but the icing on the cake has gone, and that's really one of the things that set them apart. There's obviously a series of different ingredients that set them apart, but with that gone, it feels like a whole. And I thought the singing was great, but I would agree with Mr. Gibson that everybody really, that it does get wearing because it's the same way all the way through. I found it an interesting contrast having listened to Chris Cornell, just a few weeks ago, where the difference in quality between those two voices, I think Gary is significantly better, but they both come from the same school, don't they, of the croaky, raspy rock singer. But there were some few low points on me, which I will pick out. I thought Once was terrible. That did sound like an outtake from Chris Cornell's Scream, so not interested in that one. How Many Say I thought the repetition of the line just started to make me laugh like it was a joke track. So whereas initially it would have been fine, and it almost finishes at 3.5 minutes, and then the song sort of restarts again and goes on for 6 minutes, and it's sort of, that's, we've got a similar point. There's a lack of editorial control in here, of independent oversight saying the song has said what it needs to say. Let's fade it out at this point, guys. It's Eddie's project, and he lets things run. The other thing I thought was kind of strange. So I was getting bits of musical theatre coming through to me, and I don't know musical theatre very well as a genre, but there's a few bits I thought, like what was it, on From Afar? It sounded like the Phantom of the Opera, that Phantom of the Opera type stuff. We've had that on a couple of others on the club too. I mean, Alice Cooper, you would expect it, and we had it.
I thought that sounded like I thought it sounded like an Alice Cooper song as well.
Yeah,
it was kind of theatrical, wasn't it?
It's theatrical, which is that's kind of fine, but it's also it's pulling in cliches, and you've got to handle them correctly. Otherwise, it can sound a bit lazy. But I'm suppose I'm nitpicking here, really. I think that's it. I probably wouldn't. I might sort of pop back into it at another date for a bit of fun. But glad I listened to it. It's enjoyable. That's it from me.
Yeah, I know what you mean about How Many Say I here, because I'd read about it. When you obviously, I sort of tend to listen to the album and then read about it while I'm listening, and of course lots and lots of comments about the Eddie Van Halen singing that song at the end. So I was thinking, and I was enjoying the album to a point. I thought I sort of trusted Eddie to get it right at the end. And I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to look forward to this. But when it came on, I thought it was just fucking shit. I thought it was just awful. Just didn't work at all. As soon as it started, I thought it was working. And apparently Gary Cherone is there's a harmony vocal as well, just to kind of bolster it. And the end is repetition. And so yeah, Ross, I was quite surprised that you liked that one quite so much.
I always felt it had a sort of religious, almost Gregorian chant feeling about it. I found it really hypnotic. I mean, honestly, I've listened to the album probably 5 or 6 times, but I've listened to that track a lot more. I've put it back on. I'm charmed by it.
Oh, you've listened to it 5 or 6 times? My God!
Yeah. Well, I drive to
shame.
I drive to work. I just stick it on, and
Yeah. Well, repeated listening does reveal more, doesn't it? It is strange how your relationship with a piece of music completely changes over time. But then, as you say, as everybody said, these songs they don't develop. Although Eddie's always worth listening to everything he's doing, always, even in the songs that extend their welcome, you're not really listening to the song. You're just listening to the nice things that Eddie does. Steenie, you haven't actually. I've just realised you haven't actually told us. You poor thing, you haven't actually told us
what I think of the album.
What you think of the album?
No, because I thought we would contextualise, then do the album.
No, we were, but you've been very patient because you have the most wonderful
that's all right.
So go on, give us it.
Right. Well, so it's interesting. The first time I listened to this album was in the car driving down the M6 last week, and in the car you don't get the same sort of detailed production, obviously, and the listening experience that you get when you're sitting at home listening to it properly. And what really struck me is initially, firstly, like how little like a Van Halen album is. It's a totally not a Van Halen album. There's not an element of this record that sounds like Van Halen, apart from it's certainly in the car. Getting back into a normal listening environment, the drums, that drum sound, although it's not Alex playing, they've gone for that sound. But in the car, to me, it has a very close sort of very dry production that sounds like those 80s Queen albums. So, and with Gary Cherone's voice and his obvious Queen fixation, I just kept thinking I was listening to a Queen record, like an 80s Queen record. All of the rockers on this record sound like Princes of the Universe or Tear It Up or something like that off of some mid-80s Queen record. And that isn't necessarily detrimental from my point of view, because I grew up listening to those records. So I'm not down on that by any means. But it's this. I think this record really doesn't really merit being called a Van Halen. I mean, I should merit's the wrong word. It doesn't deserve to be called a Van Halen. Well, no, it doesn't. It shouldn't be called a Van Halen album.
I agree with you.
Van Halen. It's got Eddie on it, and then a completely different singer, and barely has Alex on it, his brother, who's the other main, well, not the main component, but key component. And Mike Anthony features on 3 songs, maybe, and does some harmonies on some others. But Mike Anthony's bass playing that single note, 8th note or 16th note thing, the linchpin of the Van Halen sound. You don't hear it. I read the personnel details after I listened to the record, so I was thinking, like, bloody hell, he's gone for on this Mike Anthony. He never normally puts in these sort of runs and these made like his mad arpeggios and all this detail. He's been listening to some James Jamerson albums or some Jacko or something. Oh no, it's Eddie. I totally didn't know. I was like, Christ, he's been laying off the tequila and just really practicing. But so it's one of those records. It's like Seventh Star, that Black Sabbath album, which is Glenn Hughes and Tony Iommi. And like, is it Bev Bevan on drums for Me Alone? That is not a Black Sabbath album. It says Black Sabbath because Vertigo, I think, were the label at the time, wanted to call it Black Sabbath because otherwise it wouldn't sell. But it's exactly the same.
That was conceived to be a Tony Iommi
solo. That was going to be a Tony Iommi solo album. And it's, if I wasn't so familiar with that album, that would be a suggestion for this podcast, I think, because it's that sort of thing. But I won't be able to comment on it because I know it too well. But it's that sort of record. The solos don't sound like Eddie. They're great. The guitar playing is great, but it does, to me, there's very little like real Eddie Van Halen sound that sounds like classic Eddie Van Halen. It's also like Brian May, a lot of it. It really does sound like Queen. There's lots of like odd little harmonies in there, and just the thick sound, loads of stuff that he's doing. And he's also he's got an Eventide harmonizer, hasn't he? And I can't remember which song it is.
Primary.
Yeah, he puts in a few nice like high rings. It's the one that sounds like Top Jimmy, that song. But
no, I'm thinking Primary is the instrumental one towards the end.
All right. Well, there's another one that sounds. I think it's a Dirty Water Dog that sounds a bit like Top Jimmy, off of 1984, and it's got like.
That's the one without any gain on it. It's a clean tone.
It's a really clean, and he puts like a harmonizer on it to emphasize some of the harmonics that he does. But that sounds like he's been listening to like loads of Vi and stuff. It's a refreshingly un-90s sounding album for a record that came out in 1998. People have been saying he's trying to sound contemporary, but I think it's sort of rooted just in Eddie world. I don't know what he's aiming for.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I thought it was refreshingly unconcerned with fashion or what people wanted. He was just on his own in the studio, interested. Oh, this is quite good. Oh, this is quite good, and just following his own little musical journey, which I find quite refreshing. You know what I mean? It wasn't playing. It had no concession to anything, which at that time when everyone was chasing this, oh God, it's Motley Crue, we've got to be like this, we've got to be grunge, we've got to be this, got to be fun. He was just like, oh, I don't give a fuck. This is it, and I'm playing everything, and that's it. You know,
Exactly.
it was great.
And someone else alluded to, I can't remember who said earlier on about this record, but I think they said, it might have been Marcus said if he'd heard this record in 1998, he would have hated it. And then listening back to it again, really found lots to enjoy in it. And I was exactly the same. I think if this, I'm a Van Halen fan and was a Van Halen fan in 1998, and I didn't give a toss about this record when it came out. I didn't even bother to listen to it. It didn't, I was sort of I wasn't over Van Halen. I was still listening to the early stuff, but it wasn't something that I felt that I needed to do in 1998. Listen to another iteration of Van Halen with a singer from a band who I'd seen get showered with bottles of piss at Donington 3 years previous, and but listening back to it again, it's I think the word charm keeps coming up, and it's a charming record. There's something about it. It's not. There's an element of sort of the po-faced in some of the lyrics. Some of it takes itself a little bit seriously, but I think it's an honest record, and it's got. I think that's what wins in the end. The fact that it wasn't made with any kind of, it's got no commercial aspiration. It's got no artistic kind of grand design. I don't think he's trying to stake his claim as being like fucking Beethoven or something. I think it's, he is just doing Eddie Van Halen, but in a very un-Eddie Van Halen way. It's really refreshing.
Ross,
Yes.
you said that Ballot or the Bullet was possibly the worst song you'd ever heard in your life. Can you expand upon that, please? So I thought it was quite rocking.
Oh no, I thought that it had all those things at that sort of arena stadium rock band that I hate, where the chorus, for instance, just the Ballot or the Bullet, the choice is up to you. Just
quite timely, don't you think? Quite
well,
pertinent.
I think in better hands, yeah, absolutely. But I just no, I think I just it just was hackneyed and cliched, and it was like hey, AI, please, generate me a fist pumping soft rock anthem, please. And I didn't think it had any wit or imagination. And I probably am reaching for hyperbole when I say it's one of the worst songs I've ever heard. But every time I got to that song, listen to this album, it was like, oh, for heaven's sake, should I skip this? I'm like, no, you might find some undiscovered layers in this song, and I never did.
Well, no, fair enough, mate. It is also the 11th song on the album, like the majority of them are over 5 minutes long. So
hugely derivative.
I think that's a fair emotional response to it. Steve, Mr. Gibson,
sorry, just to go back to Ballad,
Ballad
the Bullet, it's also a massive rip-off of Nobody's Fault But Mine by Zepp. That whole riff and the way it's orchestrated is just a total rip-off.
I had to spot that. We're all going to have to listen again to that rip-off, Ross.
Yeah. And the chorus I also thought the chorus sounded like a sort of Nuclear Assault B-side or something. It had that kind of earnest comment set to like up tempo. It sounded like late 80s thrash with a message.
Was it Nuclear Assault did Hang the Pope? Was that
yeah.
Talking of copying up, I just want to another one I had and Fire in the Hole. I felt they'd ripped themselves off from I'll Wait. Thought the riff was taken from whatever album that was on, and there's been a few others where somebody else said Top Jimmy. So there's been a bit of self-reference here. Going, oh, what the hell? They wrote it in the first time around, and it says to.
I quite like, because I thought that the album, there's so much stuff that doesn't sound like Van Halen that every now and again, like Without You, Fire in the Hole, Ballot or a Bullet, when they do sound a bit like Van Halen, I'm like, oh, they sound like Van Halen. So it's kind of all
home, isn't it? Yeah.
Steve, back to you.
Yeah.
Oh, just more thoughts.
Oh, more
please.
thoughts.
More from you, please.
I completely agree with Steenie about the honesty of the album, and I think the fact that this album shows up on so many like worst albums ever made lists says more about the state of your average rock fan and the rock press than it does about Van Halen. People's inability to just take it for what it is at the time, and I've gone through what I don't like about it. But that's not the point. I think Steenie's right. It's just Van Halen in the studio doing something and doing what he wanted to do at the time. And he probably thought, you don't like it, fuck off. And I really, and I think that's, as I say, I think it says more about the state of the rock press and a lot of inverted commas music fans' closed-mindedness to just lump it in there because on there there's no. I've actually like the fact that there's no. Although inside I said I want, if I fancy a bit of Van Halen, I'm in a bit of a the sun's out, top
Top
down
down.
reference another.
Anyway,
But it's quite nice that there's an album that there isn't anything like that on there. It is a bit more, for want of a better term, a bit more progressive, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work by a long, long way. But I'm sort of glad it exists, and I'm glad he did it. And who knows if he went on and did, he's probably he might have reams of stuff that's better, that he does, but it's not commercially viable for him to put
Yeah,
out.
we haven't had a kind of opening up of the vault, have we? I suppose because his music doesn't really lend itself to vault, because I suppose people perceive what he did as Van Halen. It has to be fully formed rock music, right? So
After hearing this,
I
I wouldn't be surprised there's a sort of Prince-like sort of, all sorts of.
I wonder who would oversee that. Because I presume Alex Van Halen would have something to do with it, and I don't know
maybe
if they'd want
Wolfgang
to.
probably as well.
Oh yeah, possibly. I think, yeah. I'd love to hear. It'd be fascinating to hear, wouldn't it?
Oh, it'd be great.
You'd
Yeah.
love to hear his hard drive, just Eddie just dicking around and stuff, because the guitar playing is just stunning on this.
Well, even for non, I'm a non. I don't play the guitar, and he's obviously a virtuoso, and that can get a bit tiresome to listen to, but he never is.
No, it's weird. He never
That's
is.
special.
Never
That's a
is.
special. That's a very special thing,
That's very true. Okay, I think we can do. Should we do summing up in scores, Marcus? Do you want to? If you want to sum up, we don't have to sum up. You can go straight to score, or any other thing, any other business, and a score.
Any
please.
other business? Well, no, I think I've said it all. Actually, I won't just get into blabbering on. I'll go straight to a score, and I will give this one 52 out of 100.
Thank you. And Ross, we'll come to you next. Any further comments or summing up?
Just that, and to show my expertise in Van Halen here, I compared listening. I was listening to Balance, which is the album before.
Hang on a second. You said you listened to Balance. Oh my god! But you said you listened to the first five. So
I listened to one
Van Hagar stuff.
And I listened to 1, 2, 984, 5150 and Balance.
Oh, I see. Sorry, say which ones again?
1, 2, 1984, 5150, and then I got bored with things with numbers in the title, and I listened to Balance. So I wanted to hear the one before this.
A wide range, okay.
And it was like he was trying to do this in Balance. Like there's this one track of just guitar sounds, and it's almost like, but it didn't have a point in that album. Where this, I think, it has a point. Everything has a point in that it's playful and it's going around, but it actually it makes some sense. And I like the stuff that wasn't very Van Halen-y, which probably says more about me. So my score, or can I say how many say I would go for 50, say I.
Very good, Ross. You're too good at this, mate. You'll put this
all week.
Steenie.
Well, I think I've said nearly everything. There's lots of fine detail I picked up, and I could go on for ages about it. I think Gary Cherone, to his credit, does put in a reasonably good performance. He does. He's not bad. He's got his Freddieisms, and he's kind of a one-trick pony. And interestingly, to go back to what Ross said about not Ross, sorry, Marcus said about show tunes and musicals. He is stagey, isn't he? He did Jesus Christ Superstar and all that, and he's done a few other things.
Well, after he did that after Extreme?
Yeah, he's been on Broadway and stuff, and he played Jesus.
Didn't Sebastian Bach do that too?
Yeah, I think quite a few people. It's a well-trodden path, isn't it? And
Paul Stanley did Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah. What's that note in Gethsemane off Jesus Christ Superstar? What everyone tries to hit.
Questionable Musical Club, Critical Musicals Club.
Yeah, there's an aside to this. I won't bother with it about a video of that. But yeah, to go back to this, I think an unjustly forgotten album. I mean, I've got this as a little prop, which is Alex Van Halen's book about his life with Eddie. This album and nearly everything to do with Sammy Hagar, curiously absent. from his recollections of this. Unsurprisingly, because he's not on this album. But it's an interesting thing because when you have read this book and then you listen to this, you realize a lot about the dynamic of what made Van Halen. And it is mostly Eddie and Dave, I think. When I read that book, Alex is just enthralled to Eddie. And he's clearly the genius. And I think when you listen to this record, it's not a genius record, but it punches above its weight, I think. And I think it's not just a curio. I think it's a decent album. So to give it a final score, I reckon I'm going to give it a 59.
Very good. Is the book good, Steve? Would you recommend it?
No, it's bloody awful. It's really, really bad. I don't want to say too. My brother David bought me it, who incidentally is a really awesome drummer. So he's a bit of an Alex Van Halen fan, but it's a nice present. And I read it in one sitting, but he's a madman.
I've heard that he's apparently a total cunt.
He's not the full ticket. You read it, and it's one of the most disjointed and bizarre books that I think I've read, to be honest, by anyone famous. Like I would have got a ghostwriter in, and I think I'm not sure he did, because I think he just scrolled it all in one go.
Funny, you actually totally sold me on it now. I feel now I have to read it.
You have to read it. I think it's worth a look. It's interesting, but it doesn't paint Alex in a very good light. When you read it, you just think he's got such a raging chip on his shoulder about nearly everything. That
he's supposed to be not a very nice person. I've read things.
I get the impression from that book that he isn't, and it's probably because he never really looked very cool. Like in Van Halen, he's in a band with Michael Anthony, who never looked cool ever, but Alex never looked cool either, and Eddie and Dave always looked brill. So it must be bitter about that, and playing second fiddle to like an established genius. But I like Alex Van Halen's drumming.
Yeah, you're right. He always looked like a bit of a twat, didn't he? But what I like talking about, look, I love in the video of Without You how cool Eddie still looks, even in 1998. You know,
yeah,
he's got that hat and he's smiling away, and it's just like he's such a.
He had a good grin. He was always grinning.
Yeah,
great smile.
Yeah. Steve, summing up and a score, please.
Another curio. Glad it exists. Quite enjoyed it. Glad it's there. If I'm in the mood, I've always with all these albums, it boils down to a little bit of whether I'm going to stick it on again. If I'm in the mood for Van Halen in a year's time, when the sun's out and the top's down, it won't be this album I'm going to. But I respect it. I respect what it's done. But I'm going to give it 40 out of 100.
Okay, 40. I will just sum up briefly and give my score as well. I think we all kind of agree, really. I thought I was really pleasantly surprised. I thought it was charming. All the songs out say they're welcome. It didn't sound like a Van Halen album, but it was a. I liked his drumming. I just think there's just something charming and lovely about it. I will listen to the first two songs. I thought the first instrument I thought was really lovely, and Without You, I think is just brilliant. And it's kind of the chorus doesn't come in until like the second minute or something. It's like suddenly there's a big chorus. It's like, oh shit, yeah. So I am going to mark it higher than everyone. I'm going to give it 63. So this is totally going top 5, guys. I've got my calculator here. So we've got Steve with 40, Marcus with 52, Ross with 50, Steenie with 59, me with 63, divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gives us 52.8. 52.8, which puts it into third place, man.
Yeah.
Into third place. So we've got Humble Pie, whatever that album's called, 70 is still number 1, 72.5. Drama 61. Gary Cherone's Van Halen album, 52.8 in at number 3, 0.8 points above Slayer with God Hates Us All. So this has got the bronze medal. Unexpected.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was unexpected.
Yeah. Well, deserved though. I think because it's not shit, is it?
Yeah,
great. It's not shit.
Yeah.
Marcus,
It's my choice for
It's
next
your choice.
time.
So it's always with it, you know,
With a head in your heart.
Yeah,
It's always like, okay, Marcus.
Even by Questionable Album Club standards.
Yeah.
What's going to be dragged out this time? Yeah. Well,
Hit
there
us,
was
mate.
honestly throughout today. I've been slightly distracted because I've had two vying for top slots, and I'm going to pick. I'm going to just tell you one of the two. I've made my decision. The other one will stay secret unless you bribe me, or maybe it'll come on my next turn round.
Just save it.
It's an album, in fact, the same era as what we just heard. It's the year before, 1997. It's by Pat Boone, the famous crooner, American sort of soft. What's the word? Crooner, I suppose. Radio 2 friendly crooner. He has a album of covers called In a Metal Mood. He's covering heavy metal songs from the 1980s in a crooner style. Make of that what you will.
Available on all streaming platforms, or just if you got the one and only copy?
No, it actually is on the world famous Spotify. I came across it listening to a podcast about something completely unrelated, and it popped up in there, and I thought, well, I'll give that a go. So I have had a little listen to it in advance, but I don't know the album well. You will probably know one of the tracks in its Pat Boone version. I'll leave that with you.
I know.
Discover it. But, let's see what we all think. See you in 2 weeks' time.
Pat Boone, I know the name, but he wasn't the bearded bloke in Our Feeds Named Pat, was he?
That's Pat Roach.
Oh yeah,
Bomber.
The wrestler.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
I want to hear his album.
Now you're talking. You know.
Let's just find Pat Boone. You'll definitely know Pat Boone.
Pat Boone was the watered down. He was the rock and roll. He was the like white alternative to all of the Little Richard and Fats Domino records, wasn't he? He re-recorded sort of really dainty versions of Tutti Frutti and stuff like that.
He's been around since the 50s. Two Hearts, Ain't Not a Shame, I'll Be Home, I Almost Lost My Mind, Friendly Persuasion, Chains of Love, Love Letters in the Sand. I mean, it's all classic, Sunday afternoon Radio 2.
I believe his nickname was Pure Velvet, was it not?
You might well be right.
Yeah, his name was Pure Velvet because his voice was so velvety.
Yeah, he's absolute squeaky clean. Think he's go to church every Sunday, all this stuff.
Is he still alive?
I don't know.
Oh, I think he might. He probably is. He's probably never touched a drop of anything funny.
90 years old. How about that? And he's still with us.
Fantastic.
Television personality. He sold nearly 50 million records and had 38 top 40 hits. And he's appeared in various Hollywood films. So he's quite something.
Wow, fantastic! Well, it's a radical choice. Looking forward to this. I think.
Yeah,
you can sort of put it on in front of your grandparents.
You could do. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping we'll get into is there validity in a humorous album? Should certain genres be held with reverence, or do they work in different styles?
I see where you're going.
Their quality shine through when you take out the original instrumentation and the sonic atmosphere of heavy metal. Does it work in another style,
or is it Mike Flowers Pops?
Yeah.
Yes, we shall see.
We shall see. Yeah.
And can Marcus get out of the zone?
all the I've listened to that. All the bottom albums are all Marcus's ones.
He's the Saint Southampton Football Club of the Questionable Album Club.
Well, I was going to say.
On that note, see,
really, thank you very much.
Marcus, can you edit that bit out, please? Edit that last comment out. We've got away at Chelsea tonight. Well, hey, kick off now.
Yeah.
Wow, on that bombshell.
Yeah.
Right, thanks everyone. That was really fun. Thank you, Marcus, for that, and thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see you on the next one. Questionable.